Hello and welcome to the JackCast, the Swansea City podcast. I am Guto and with me, as always, we have Steve Carroll. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. We've got two Swansea games to look back at this evening, one of which was against Leeds, the other against Nottingham Forest, both of which didn't quite go the way we wanted them to, despite some valiant efforts from the players. We'll start off, Steve, with Sunday's match against Leeds United, a match which was really built up to be a big occasion because Cardiff had dropped point of the week against Blackburn and then followed that up with defeat against Fulham, which opened the door for the Swans to get into the playoff spots if they could just get something against probably the best team in the division, let's be honest. Before we get into the game, Steve, I think this match, more than any other during lockdown, was the one that you felt, oh, I wish I was there. I really, really regret the fact that we are watching this on a TV screen and not able to actually be in the Liberty, because Leeds matches, they're always big matches, but this one was all set up to be a huge occasion.
Yeah, I did think that on the morning of the game, actually. It's like, obviously, we're all disappointed that we can't go to games at the moment, but if you look at it, that Leeds game that we had the year that we went up from League One, probably for me one of the most memorable games there's been at the Liberty. And I remember the place was on fire in terms of atmosphere. And then you think of the game we won 3-0 here. We went up to the Prem, and then obviously even the game last season where we drew 2-2 was a cracker. So it did seem to be the case that every time Leeds come down here, it seemed to be a big occasion. And obviously, as you say, this time was a big game with it being late on, with only a few games left. So, yeah, I think it was definitely the type of game where, you just sense if we could have had a full house there, which you probably would have done in normal circumstances, that, it's a game that you'd all look forward to, and it'd be fingers crossed for a result. But as you say, really quite frustrating that we couldn't go, although with the way the game ended, it may have been slightly better with hindsight.
Yeah, we were coming off of 2 wins going into that match, and the one against Birmingham, I think, was pretty reassuring as well. I know Birmingham were awful, but there were some promising signs there. Leeds, of course, had come off a 5-0 win against Stoke, which really sent a message to the rest of the league, I think, before we even started. But I'll be honest, I thought we started the game pretty well and fought really well throughout the match. That 5-3-2 formation seemed to contain Leeds for long periods to frustrate them. I thought we were really putting up a good fight in midfield. I think Leeds were dealing with everything that we were offering in an attacking sense very, very well, but we were still being positive. We were still trying to get the ball into dangerous positions. And still taking the game to Leeds. And for most of the match, Steve, I was really encouraged. I thought we were putting in a really good fight.
Yeah, I agree with that, really. I thought we more than matched them. Really, they didn't have a great deal of good chances or anything. I think probably the frustrating thing from our point of view is that we probably didn't ourselves either. But like I say, the formation seems to suit us better. I think we should have done it earlier in the season, if truth be told. I think we've said all season about we're strong in some areas of the team, but then we're weaker in others. And centre back has been one of the stronger ones with strength and depth. Maybe not so much recently because of obviously we've had a few injuries, but it did just seem to suit us that little bit better. And we don't have to play with wingers, which, if I'm honest, our wide men have not been great this season, even though we've got Premier League wingers. If you listen to Wyndham Evans, but yeah, I think it did sort of suit us, and we were more than holding our own against them, really, which was encouraging because obviously when you see some of the results that Leeds have had this season, including that one quite recently against Stoke, you are thinking this could be a bad day for us. But no, to be fair, we competed really well. It was quite encouraging, as have been all the games really since we switched the formation.
Yeah, it really was, and it's just a shame really that. I think it got to a stage in the second half, which I think was the same in tonight's match as well, where players just started to look like they were getting tired, and it felt like we were really clinging on to a point. And we knew that a point would have been massive because it would have taken us into the playoff spots. But it just felt like we were holding on and holding on and holding on. But, we have to discuss substitutions before we get to the goal because well, Cooper brought on Wayne Routledge on 81 minutes for Rhian Brewster, which was a very negative substitution. You're basically saying we're not going to be playing with a striker for the rest of the game. But that was his first substitution. He waited until the 81st minute. And I can kind of understand that because the formation had been working very, very well up until not long before that. But I felt once we got to like the 80th minute, it was pretty obvious by then that a number of players were absolutely exhausted, were really clinging on in that match. And this kicked off a heck of a debate online. I mean, between people said, the system was working pretty well and, it was worth just taking that risk instead of trying to change the formation to bring on subs, etc. But I'll be honest, my opinion was I think we could have used Van der Horn on. I think we could have used Byers on earlier. I think we could have used even bringing on Selena in a like-for-like substitution with one of the more attacking players, just to bring on those fresh legs, if I'm honest. I don't know how you felt about this, Steve.
Yeah, I agree with you. You could see we were struggling. I mean, it was a very hot day, wasn't it, on Sunday? It was always going to be, one of those days where it's, it is difficult to play at full pelt for 90 minutes when it is that hot. It was one of the few occasions where I think a drinks break was actually needed because I think they've been a little bit over the top, if I'm honest with you. But we should have made subs, not just for even to give us that fresh legs, I don't think, although that would be a main reason of it, but we could have also used it to, disrupt the play a bit, because it didn't seem like as if we were going to score, if I'm honest with you, and it did seem like they were more likely. And what we could have done was, I'm not saying the options we had maybe were necessarily great, but we did have the likes of Byers on the bench and Van der Horn, as you say. I think the Van der Horn situation is interesting. Like he did come on in the Sheffield Wednesday game, and I'm looking at the Birmingham game and thinking, at 3-1, we were pretty safe. Why didn't he have half an hour? Because he really should have done, I think. It was obvious if he could play the Sheffield Wednesday game for a similar amount of time, then we should have been trying to build him up, and the game was done at that point. If we'd done that, maybe we could have then introduced him, for example. And I think Garrick should have been on the bench, if I'm honest, against Leeds, because as much as he maybe hasn't been so good recently, we would have had that outlet as pace. And if we were defending, then if we get him the ball, and he could have got us up the pitch and wasted a few minutes. So, we definitely should have made subs. There's no two ways about it. I know we can always say maybe it wouldn't have made a difference, but I really think it probably would have. And like I say, you can use it to disrupt the play as much as anything else, because there's nothing worse, is it, when you're trying to push for a goal and the opposition just like bring on a sub or two and then just waste time, disrupt everything. And it definitely works. And I think we should have done that, really. It may not have made a difference, but we'll never know now, will we? And I think it's something we definitely should have bared in mind, because that point, as you say, would have been huge. I mean, things have been so tight in this division that you just don't know at the end of the day how much of a precious point that would have been. And it's definitely one that we could have done with. And like I say, psychologically, taking us into that top six, would have been a big thing, I think, with only 3 games to go.
Yeah, and it's not something I really want to concentrate on too much, because I think, in fairness to Cooper, I think his tactics on the whole over the last few games have been very good. I think he's in a tactical sense, this is the best that we've seen from Cooper as a manager since his earliest days with us. But this issue of substitutions is something that's gone on for a very long time. I mean, coming into these post-lockdown matches, I crunched the numbers and worked out that only 2 managers in the entire division had made less use of their subs than Steve Cooper had. He's very hesitant to use subs. He uses fewer than almost anybody else in the division, and he gives them fewer minutes than almost anybody in the division. And I just think in this period where we've had 5 substitutes available to us and we have got quite a small squad, I do think, looking back, do you know what if he had just kept, I mean, it may not have made any difference whatsoever, but I'm looking back at that Birmingham match where we were comfortably 3-1 up. I think we were, able to take our foot off a little bit in those final stages. He waited until the 82nd minute before making his only substitution, bringing Routledge on for Brewster. did he need to leave 10 players on for the entire 90 minutes? In that kind of match, I don't think he did, especially with two quick-fire, huge games coming up against two of the best teams in the division. Looking back, you're thinking if we had just made a few substitutions on the hour mark in that game, could we have saved some legs? Could we have kept some freshness in the team, which may have just helped us out in the dying minutes against Leeds and Forest? I don't know. It's hard to say, but there is definitely a culture here with Cooper that he is very keen to keep players on for as long as possible. He is very conservative with the subs. He's very hesitant to make changes during matches. And I do think, I have to be honest, it's cost us on a few occasions this season, and I thought it possibly cost us against Leeds as well. That's my opinion. One player who had to leave the pitch due to injury in that match was Freddie Woodman in the dying minute, Steve. And it looks now like we've seen the last of him. Before I guess we get on to the goal, I mean, that's going to be a heck of a loss for us. Well, I guess it's not going to be a heck of a loss, but it's, well, I guess, how do you see Woodman's season is the question I guess we should be asking. How much of a success has he been for you?
Well, he's definitely been a success. I mean, he started really well, obviously. There was a penalty save in the second game of the season at Derby, and there's been a few other penalty saves, so that's always an added bonus with him. I do think there's been a few mistakes as the season's gone on. I remember the game against Derby at home, where he didn't have a particularly good game and he was suspect for some of the goals that we conceded. I think with his feet, he's not brilliant. I suppose that's not sort of the end of the world, because I've always used the excuse, Nordfeldt was good with his feet, but the bloke couldn't save a shot. So, the goalkeeper's main job is to keep the ball out of the goal as much as you would, from our style of play point of view, you would want someone that's good with his feet as well. But it has been a success. The fact is, we've got to look at last season and say that goalkeepers were a big reason why we did not get into the top six. There's no two ways about it. Mainly Nordfeldt, but I think the situation where we chopped and changed a lot. Mulder did well at the start of the season, and then for some reason Potter decided to put Nordfeldt back in, and it did backfire, I think. Whereas at least this season we have had a consistent number one, and in general he has been pretty good for us. I would say one of the better goalkeepers in the division. So it's been a success. Obviously, he's been a crowd favourite because he seems to love it here, doesn't he? I think it'll be, he said he seems keen to come back again next year, and I wouldn't be against that. But at the same time, we are going to have to weigh up things in terms of loans, I suppose, because we're going to be short in other areas, and you'd have to look at it. And I think, Stephen Bender obviously has played at Swindon this year. Could he be maybe the number one, and we go down a different route then with loans? Because there's no point loaning a goalkeeper if he isn't going to start. So, yeah, but either way with Woodman, it's been a success. And if he doesn't come back, then I think we'll always remember him quite fondly, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I'm reading between the lines. I think I rate Woodman a bit higher than most Swans fans. I think he's been very good for us, I'll be honest. Maybe my opinion is slightly blurred by the fact that we had Nordfeldt last season who could not be trusted at all between the sticks. And goalkeeping was definitely our biggest weakness last season. But I think Woodman's been a really, really good asset for the club this season. You're talking Championship keepers, where there is a big, big gap between Premier League and Championship keepers, probably bigger than any other position, if I'm being honest. But I think by Championship standards, I think he can be very, very pleased with this season. I think he's been one of the best five regular keepers in the division, if I'm being honest. He has made mistakes. I mean, around that Derby game that you mentioned, he did definitely have a really jittery spell where he didn't really look comfortable at all in goal. But other than that, I think he's been very reliable. He's made very, very few mistakes outside of that spell there, which have led to goals. He's a good shot stopper. He's very assertive off his line, coming for crosses, etc., which is a great help, and that's not something you get from many Championship goalkeepers. And I think he's done very well, yeah. And for his age, especially, I think he can be very, very happy with the season he's had. And if he was to come back here, I'd be very happy to take him back here, because I do think, like I said, he's been one of the best in the Championship this season. But if that is the last that we have seen of him, then I think he leaves us with some very good memories. Unfortunately, Steve, one of his final jobs as a Swans keeper was picking the ball at the net, because despite our best efforts, despite desperately trying to hold on until the final minute, it was the curse of the former player again, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know it happens a lot against sides, but it does seem to be us every time, doesn't it? And really sods law that it's happened again, and obviously it was a damaging one this time, wasn't it, with Hernandez popping up with that goal at the end, and so frustrating, really, isn't it? I mean, we always say the best feeling in football is to win late on, but the worst feeling is to lose late on, isn't it? And obviously, I suppose Leeds have enacted a little bit of revenge on us, because we did go up there and do something similar to them, although I suppose you could argue we were a bit more fortuitous than what maybe they were the other day, because we it was a real smash and grab, wasn't it, up there? But it was a damaging moment, isn't it? And as you say, I mean, when you put so much into a game, to then lose like that, it's a tough one to take, isn't it? And obviously with the circumstances by how big the game is, I think it just adds to the pain, really, doesn't it?
It was just a horrible way, because you just started to get the stage where you think, I think we may have done enough for a point. And obviously that was torn away from us. And you could see the reaction of the players. They were absolutely devastated. And once that ball hit the back of the net, you knew that the points were lost. And it just put that extra pressure then on the team going into, tonight's match, because we are recording this straight after the Nottingham Forest match. It put that pressure on them, especially because Cardiff had won against Derby, which seemed to be the toughest game of their remaining 3 games. So there was a real feeling, I think, Steve, that the Swans had to win tonight, really, to keep the pressure on Cardiff and to really seriously remain in the playoff spots. And in fairness, despite the tiredness after the Leeds match, we started the game against Forest absolutely brilliantly, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I mean, we had some early chances, didn't we? Obviously, AU with a header that looked like it might be going in, and then there was a Connor Roberts shot, wasn't there, early on? We were playing really well. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And then when that goal did come through Brewster, which was a great finish, by the way, we just felt like we did deserve, to be in front, because we were well on top, weren't we? Really, playing well, as I say, creating chances, and it was really encouraging, because obviously our record against sides above us in the division, and quite frankly every top half side is pretty abysmal, isn't it? So for us to actually make a good start against one, it was just really encouraging. But obviously it didn't last, did it? And what was so frustrating really about that goal was that Forest had done nothing, didn't they? And from nowhere they found themselves level. Yeah,
that was frustrating. I mean, that first 20 minutes, I'll be honest, it was as good as any 20-minute period we've seen from the Swans in a very long time. Like you said, we were passing the ball around really well, keeping possession, creating chances. Brewster's strike was absolutely superb. And out of nowhere then, Sammy Amiobi just wriggles a bit of space and curls it into the corner. It's a fantastic goal. But it changed the nature of the game, really, because it just settled Forest, because they hadn't been very good up until that point. They really, really struggled to get a foothold in the game. But suddenly, goals change games, and that one definitely did. It allowed Forest then to just sit back, to get that little bit of a comfort zone going. And, it was just... It made it a bit more difficult for us to get into the game. And for the rest of the first half, I thought it was pretty even. I mean, we didn't create as many chances after that. Forest didn't create anything either. But there was a moment of controversy towards the end of that first half, Steve. 2 things. Was it a penalty? And should that goal have stood? Because from where I was looking, I'll be honest, the contact seemed to be outside the box, and Andre Ayew undoubtedly stopped in the middle of his run-up.
Yeah, I agree with you on both, really. I think, the penalty did look like a surprise, really. I mean, when he gave it, it was a bit like, he's given the pen, yeah? But
I didn't know what he'd given. I saw he's pointed to the spot. I was like, why? Is there something here that I haven't seen? I could not, because it never occurred to me that there was anything in that move which could have led to a penalty. So I was like, what's the ref seen here that we haven't? And the truth was the ref had, well, just got it wrong.
Yeah, he had. I was sort of similar, but when obviously the ref points to the spot like he did, you think, well, he's given the pen, surely. You know what I mean? The only other thing he could be given with that is like a goal kick or something. And obviously it couldn't be that, could it? But it was a strange one. I think it was, and as you say, outside the box. So it shouldn't have been given. There's no two ways about it. We got away with that one, and yeah, the run up again. It's a bit suspect, isn't it, to say the least? But suppose we got away with one for once, didn't we? Or maybe got away with two.
Yeah, we did. I mean, it was one of those instances where if it had been given against us, I'd be fuming. I'd be absolutely slating the ref. And I'll be honest, I don't think the referee had a great game tonight, even though most of the big decisions went our way. I thought he was awful. I'll be honest, I thought he was absolutely shocking tonight. And perhaps in the second half, there was a bit of evening it up because my opinion was that Gallagher was fouled in the build-up to Forest's goal. He was kind of bundled over from behind and handled the ball as players do to try and persuade the referee that it's a foul. But the referee on this occasion decided that it wasn't a foul, therefore he gave a free kick for handball against Gallagher. And from that free kick, they eventually scored another class goal from Amiobi. I guess questions for you: Do you think it was a foul on Gallagher? And two, do you think that shot from Amiobi should be going in, really?
On the ref, really, he was a strange one, I thought. Obviously, that was a bad decision with the penalty, as we say. But it did seem like Forest were quite a dirty side, I thought, in general. They made a lot of fouls, and they weren't really taking, massive amount of punishment for them. So that was quite frustrating. That free kick, it's soft. I think we're a bit unlucky with that. But at the same time, I mean, we had ample opportunity really to stop the second goal going in. And should Mulder do better? Yeah, I think he probably should, to be honest with you. But I suppose the issue is with Mulder, the bloke has not played a competitive game for about 18 months, has he? Because for some strange reason, even in the cup competitions this year, Nordveld was deemed as the better bet. So, I can understand this. He was never going to be, perfect. I think he's always going to be a bit rusty, and he should have saved it.
Yeah, it's not one that I'm going to criticise Mulder for, really. It's just that I think if Woodman was in goal, or if Mulder had even had like 5 games before that to warm up, I think he's probably tipping that one around the post. But because he was coming into this game a little rusty without any football at all, I think he was just, his reactions are a little bit slower. He's a bit slower to get down to that corner, and it's a fantastic strike. I mean, it's perfectly aimed, but it creeps in when I think a fresher goalkeeper would probably have tipped that around the corner. It's not a terrible mistake or anything like that, but it's just the kind of fine margins, I think, that you get in football, and it's always difficult for a backup keeper, and I don't think there are many better backup goalkeepers in the Championship than Owen Mulder. But it was one of those situations where you think a first choice goalkeeper or a second choice goalkeeper who's had a few games under his belt would probably have kept that out. I mean, after that, Steve, I thought we tired badly, I'll be honest. I thought from about an hour on that around half the team looked like they were dead on their feet. Gallagher in particular was just looking like a shadow of his usual self. And he's had, if I'm being honest, in a lot of games recently, he's been tiring and he's been kept on for much longer than he should have. And I was surprised that it was Fulton who made way for Salina and not Gallagher. And even if Cooper was being bold and trying to go for it with that substitution, I still think Gallagher should have been taken off for Byers. Because I just, and he wasn't the only one. I mean, Van der Horn had to be taken off just because he's not been playing much football. I thought Bidwell looked quite tired towards the end of it. Connor Roberts didn't have the same vigour that he had earlier on in the game. There were just a number of players who just looked like their bodies were giving up on them. And it's unsurprising because they had just played such a tough game against Leeds and were now going into a really attritional match against Nottingham Forest. But from around 60 minutes on, I just felt like the fatigue had kicked in, and it just didn't look from that point on like we were ever going to get a goal.
Yeah, it did seem like that. There was that one Andre Ayew chance, wasn't there?
That was it, really, wasn't it?
Yeah,
there wasn't anything apart from that.
Yeah, it just seemed like that second goal maybe knocked the stuffing out of us a little bit as well, which I can sort of understand. But like you say, I mean, there's so many games that with this playing, midweek and weekend all the time, and the with there being 5 subs, I mean, you just got to try and make use of it a bit. I mean, how many of those players have started every game? I mean, there must be a lot of them. I mean, I'm thinking Byers obviously has started, a couple, isn't he? And then there was the time when we were playing, obviously 4 at the back. I think the likes of Norton and Roberts have not started every game, but there's a lot of players in there that have played every game, and probably not just every game, every minute really as well. So, I think it's tough, isn't it? And obviously, like I said, we're playing at a time of year that we're not used to, where it's a lot hotter than what it normally is, and you've just got to try and make changes. And I know it's easier for the sides that have got bigger squads and better squads, because they will make more changes, but you've got to make use of what you've got. I mean, there were players on the bench that are half decent. I mean, look at Selina. He hasn't started a single game since the football has resumed, and you're just thinking, well, he must be worth something at the start at some point if you're going to rotate things. I know he hasn't been brilliant, but he is a potential match winner for us. So you just need to be a little bit clever sometimes and just change things around. And he's not done that. And as you say, the reluctance of subs in general when you're tiring out. I mean, I know you can have, like, if you think, you can't take certain players off or whatever like that, but at the same time, they're tiring out. They're not going to be much use to anybody either. I mean, Grimes must have played every minute, for example. I mean, he never ever seems to take him off. I know he's the captain, but he's just an example. And sometimes you just need to give players a rest and just freshen things up, don't you? But he seems reluctant to do it, and I think it probably has cost us in some games.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw the players tiring after 60 minutes. It didn't look like we were going to get a goal anyway, but I think our hopes of getting 3 points in the next match were well and truly crucified when Kyle Norton went and got himself sent off. I don't think there were any complaints about the red, but how did you see that tackle, Steve? What was going through his head?
It's just foolish, isn't it? I don't know if he's trying to maybe just stop the break, which, okay, I get that bit, but there's sort of a way to do it in it. Just tug a shirt, just be a bit of a pain, but you can't put your studs down the back of somebody. I mean, it was a crazy thing to do, isn't it? I mean, there wasn't that long of the game left, and now he's going to have a 3-game ban, obviously, and the way he should now be thinking about it as well, he's probably not going to be here next season. So a 3-game ban, he'll miss 2 games for us. Probably won't make the playoffs now. We'll go on to that later. But then he'll be banned for the first game of next season as well. And I mean, you don't want to be banned for the first game of the next season, because the fact is you won't play that game. And then if the team starts doing well, it's difficult to get into the side, isn't it? I mean, I remember when Andy Robinson, for example, got sent off late on the last year of the Vetch. And then he had to miss the last game of the Vetch. He had to miss the Bury game. And I think he had to miss the start of the next season. And like I said, we were doing really well. It took him until around Christmas time to get in the team. So, it's just a dull thing to do, really. And it's going to hurt him, I think, because I don't think he'll be here next year, Carl Norton. And like I say, he'll be somewhere else. And he immediately now knows that he can't make his debut in the first game of the season. So, foolish move. And it won't do him any favours for sure.
No, I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, he was trying to just trip him up and take a yellow card, and he just got it wrong and ended up studying him. I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt for that, because I mean, if he genuinely tried to make that tackle, then that's absolutely insane. Because it was a stonewall red card, an absolute shocker. Planting the studs into somebody's calf is just a one-way ticket to an early bath, really. And you could see he got up, he gave a kind of pleading look to the referee very, very quickly, and then just turned and went down to down the tunnel. He knew that he'd done wrong. He knew that it was a shocker. I mean, we'll might as well discuss Kyle Norton's legacy, because he's been here for about 5 years now. How do you think, if he doesn't get a contract, and I personally do hope he does get a contract, because I think he's been very good for us in the Championship, and I think he would be very, very useful for us next season as well. But if for any kind of reason either we don't offer him a contract or he doesn't accept a contract, say now this is his final game for the Swans, how do you think he'll be remembered?
Probably a bit indifferent, really, isn't it? Obviously, he was signed to replace Rangel, I suppose, is the way of looking at it. But was he as good as Rangel was when he was at his best? I'd probably say no, to be honest. He was just a player that was a little bit younger. So, we ultimately, the likes of Rangel needed to be replaced. And I suppose it wasn't bad business getting him in, but it probably didn't live up to the expectations either, really. And I think his better performances have been probably over the last couple of years where we've dropped down the division. So, I think that probably says a lot, really. I mean, if you're asking me, will he get a Prem club now? I'm not really sure. If he does, it will probably be as a backup somewhere. So, I think it's not been like a terrible signing or anything like that, but it probably hasn't been one that's worked out as well as we would have liked either, I would say. So, it's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? But I think ultimately he is going to leave. I think it would probably be a good thing for us to keep him, because we don't have a great deal of experience here, and obviously we're going to lose players as it is. So we don't want to. He's probably one of the better ones to sign a contract, most certainly. But we've got to be realistic about these things. Our finances are not good. We do have Connor Roberts who can play in the same position. So the best thing to do is to probably show him the door and save money on what is probably one of the highest earners at the club, really.
It's a strange one with Norton, because if you'd asked me this question 2 years ago, I'd have been scathing of Norton, really, because I don't think we should have bought him when we did. I didn't think he was a Premier League right back when he was first bought. I mean, we didn't spend a huge amount on him, but I didn't think he was as good as what we had in Rangel. He never really convinced me when playing for Spurs. I always thought he looked substandard, really, playing in that team. And in the Premier League, I do think he was substandard. I don't really think he was up to Premier League standards. I thought he was too, I guess, one-dimensional. He was predictable. He was a decent defensive right back, but in attack didn't provide much at all, really. And I always felt for years that we were a better team with Rangel starting than we were with Kyle Norton starting. And I thought Kyle Norton was actually one of the first signings the Swans made, which were quite lazy signings, quite short-sighted signings, which put us on a path to ruin, really. But in fairness to him, I mean, his attitude since we were relegated has been top notch. He's been one of the most senior players in the squad, and he's acted like it. He's been a responsible, mature head, despite what his red card may suggest tonight. He's been, a calm presence in a very young squad, and whenever he's played in the Championship, in many different positions as well, right back, centre back, left back, midfield, he's done a job wherever he's been asked to play, and he's been a very, very important player for us over the last few years, and that's why I would like to see him given a contract if possible. He may need to take a bit of a wage cut, but we're going to be losing a lot of players this summer, and some of them loans, some of them players that we're going to be cashing in on. If there is any way that we can keep Kyle Norton, I would really like to keep him, because I think he would be useful in what I think is going to probably be a difficult season next year. But yeah, if that is Kyle Norton's last game, then it's going to be slightly mixed. His legacy, in my opinion, but it will be a shame if that's how he goes, really. So the game ended 2-2. Usually, Steve, a good result at the City ground, but I don't think we can really count it as a good result in our current situation.
No, I'm the same as you, really. I mean, you'd think before a ball was kicked, if this was, I don't know, 5 or 6 games ago, you go, yeah, that's a very good point, and there's some encouraging signs from the performance as well, really. But the fact that Cardiff won last night. Obviously, Millwall did as well. Looking at that and thinking, well, we're 3 points behind them. Goal difference is sort of similar. So if Cardiff were to lose and obviously we win the 2 games, that would be enough. But I think the problem is when you look at it now, you think Cardiff have got Middlesbrough next. Middlesbrough now had a win last night. They're not really far off safety. Are they 4 points clear of the drop zone now, or am I making that up? Something like that, either way. And you're just thinking now, well, Hull obviously their goal difference is absolutely horrendous. For example, so like they would probably need 2 wins to overhaul Middlesbrough. The likes of Charlton are in there as well. You just think that Middlesbrough probably have done enough now to stay up, and you'd want them to need something to pile pressure on Cardiff really. And the other problem then, of course, is that Cardiff's final game is Hull at home, which I think everybody's dream fixture right now, probably, isn't it? So I think we probably needed to win. Is the honest answer. Must win, obviously, as some of us like to say. But it looks a big ask, doesn't it? Because Cardiff now can go with the attitude in Middlesbrough, right? Just don't lose, and win the last game, and they should be all right. Obviously, I know Millwall are still in there as well, so there's that conundrum, isn't there? So that does put Cardiff under a little bit of pressure, but Millwall, I think if Cardiff were to draw, they could overhaul them, but then it would go to goal difference. Cardiff's is 1 better at the moment, so I suppose it's not out of the question. But again, if you've got Hull on the last day and you score a pile of goals, then again you've got the dream fixture, haven't you? So in short, we're probably not going to get into the playoffs now. That's what I would have thought, and I'm sure it's an opinion you share.
Yeah, I don't say must win willy-nilly, as you know. But I said must win before tonight's game. I thought really after Cardiff's win against Derby that we needed to really keep the heat on them. And quite possibly even with the win against Forest, it wouldn't have been enough because Cardiff's last 2 games are so easy. But I just don't see it. No, I can't see even if we can raise our game for Bristol City and Reading, which is going to be difficult because, as we saw tonight, I think the players are pretty shattered at the moment. Even if we can get 6 points in that game, you're asking Cardiff to lose against either Middlesbrough or Hull just to give us a chance. And I don't see it really. I'm uneasy relying on Neil Warnock because I don't think he can really be relied upon. If I'm being honest, Middlesbrough are pretty safe at the moment. I think they're 5 points clear of the bottom 3. And let's face it, when Neil Warnock doesn't need to win, he's not the kind of manager that's going to be putting pressure on his team to win. I think he'll probably feel they've done enough at the moment, and I think they'll probably give Cardiff a softer game than they may have done a couple of weeks ago. And Hull, like you said, I mean, what on earth has happened to that club? I mean, talk about mismanagement. About halfway through the season, we were thinking, they're outsiders for the playoff spots. When they sold Bowen and Grzycki, they weren't too far off us. And you think, and I'll be honest, I thought, they can probably get away with selling those 2 now because they're probably not going to go down. But the scale of their demise, it's absolutely astonishing. They picked up 6 points since January 1st. They've won 1 game since January 1st. That's appalling, absolutely terrible. And there's no way that you can see them staying up now. It would be a miracle if they did. And I definitely don't back them to get anything against Cardiff, unfortunately. So I'll be honest, all we can do, I guess, is win our remaining 2 games, try to keep the pressure on Cardiff. But I just don't see it. I think the chances are sadly gone by now. It was just too big an ask after dropping the points against Luton and Millwall. I just think it's the Luton game probably. If we're looking back at matches during the lockdown period, which cost us, I just think that Luton game really, really cost us big time and gave us too much of a mountain to climb. Obviously, looking back across the whole season, there have been a pile of games where we should have got more out of them, but we were sloppy. We conceded late goals. We didn't turn up against weak teams, etc. But in the lockdown specifically, I think that Luton game is the one that will end up costing us much more than a defeat against Leeds or 2 points dropped against Forest will be, just because you kind of expect those results and you can't really complain when you drop points against the best in the division when you're a club in our position. So obviously, mathematically, it's still all to play for, but realistically, it's a heck of a long shot now for us to get the playoffs. And I guess hope suddenly shifts to just pleading that Cardiff City aren't going to get a lucky break in the playoffs and go up. So, I mean, I guess, Steve, yeah, we've still got something mathematically to play for in the final games, and that moves us on to our next game, which is against Bristol City, a team which has had a bit of a mixed season, to say the least, and a season which probably hasn't lived up to expectations, really. Some big signings in the summer. They've spent quite a bit of money over the last few years, albeit they've also lost quite a few big names. But they would have been hoping to break into playoffs this season after messing it up last year. And sadly for them, I mean, they messed it up again this year. And it ended up costing Lee Johnson his job after they lost to Cardiff. Weirdly, of course, since Lee Johnson left Ashton Gate, they've gone on an unbeaten run, albeit against three of the poorest sides in the division. A win against Hull, a win against Middlesbrough, and then a draw against Stoke. I mean, for me, there are tougher teams that we could be playing this weekend, but if we are desperate for 3 points, Bristol City probably isn't the ideal team for us to be playing against.
No, probably not. They've, as you say, they've picked up, haven't they? And I think historically down the years, they've not been a side that we've done great against. I know it probably doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but when you look back at that 7-1 we had against them once, but we really haven't had many wins against them. And obviously they beat us twice last season. We didn't score. This year we drew with them 0-0. So again, we didn't score. And the other thing is, of course, they are a side that's in the top half of the league. And our record against the top half reads played 21, won 3. And 2 of those wins were in August and the other one was in October. So, I think when you look at it like that, you can't really moan either really about our current situation and why we're not in the top 6, because that record is just nowhere near good enough. I know we've had a lot of draws in there, but you've got to be able to beat some of the decent teams, and we just can't do it for whatever reason. We can't even beat the ones that are average, but it looks of it quite often. So, yeah, it's a team that's picked up, as you say. They were probably still had a bit of a sniff, really, of going into the playoffs. An outside bet, mind, don't get me wrong, but because they were beating Stoke this evening, but they conceded then, so they're too far off now to get in there. But for us, it's fairly straightforward, isn't it? As you've said, it's must win. So we're going to have to pile everything forward onto this game if we've got any intention of making the most of that minuscule chance that we now have of the playoffs. So yeah, it is that simple, really.
Yeah, I mean, games against Bristol City for the most part are pretty uninspiring, which is a bit surprising because both teams, traditionally are capable of playing good football and good attacking football, but they tend to be very low scoring. It tends to be quite attritional. Bristol City don't have a bad squad. There are some good players there. What are the tactics that we should be taking into this game? Because, like you said, it is must win. There is no other possible result that would be acceptable after this weekend's match. So I think we're all in favour of keeping the 5-3-2, which has worked very well for us over the last few games. But are there any changes that you'd make tactically, or just to rest players who you feel have looked a bit tired over the last few weeks?
I think I would be tempted to take Gallagher out, if I'm honest, because he does just look quite tired, and we do need to maybe freshen things up. I mean, I don't know what we'll do defensively. Obviously, Van der Horn did play tonight, so whether now he can or can't, I don't know. And obviously Cabango, we know, is nursing a hernia, I think it is, so he's only played half an hour as opposed to 90 minutes. So would he then go back in? And obviously we have to make one change anyway, don't we, because of the Norton situation. So that then makes you think, right, well, do we now have to play Van der Horn and Cabango, really? Or are we going to have to change the system? So I suppose that red card really does cause us that little bit of a headache. But I mean, you would argue that, you know, if we're going to get playoffs, we're going to have to take risks anyway. And arguably, does that mean we have to risk Cabango and Van der Horn? So I suppose that's the interesting thing. Obviously, if we do change the shape back to 4 at the back, which hasn't suited us hugely, to be honest with you, then that does give us more options. And obviously then the likes of maybe Kalulu or Garrick can come into the team, maybe Selena or something like that. But I suppose it is now with that red card, it does make you think he may change it. If he does it, you know, I would sort of understand why, but at the same time, this formation has worked, and I think we need to try and find a way of keeping it if we can.
Well, when Cooper first tested this out a couple of weeks back against Sheffield Wednesday, it was Wayne Routledge who was playing at right wing back. Is that worth another go?
It's not something that I like, if I'm honest with you, but at the same time, you know, we are short of numbers now, aren't we? So I suppose it's something that maybe we need to consider.
That's grim, isn't it? I mean, Wayne Routledge at right wing back it's not something that we should really be considering, if we're being honest. That's bad. Yeah, but you know, we are in a bit of a sticky situation because we don't have too many options. I think probably fitness is going to dictate, and we're probably going to have to abandon the 5-3-2. And I think we'd be better off doing that than trying to play players who aren't capable of playing 90 minutes from the start, and then playing someone like Routledge at right wing back, which I think is just asking for trouble. So I suspect we're probably going to have to go back to 4-3-3, which will be a shame because 5-3-2 has worked very well for us over the last few games. But I'm with you. I think Gallagher's got to be given a break. I think he's been overplayed. I mean, he was a bit tired when he arrived with us in January after a really tough first half of the season again, for Charlton, where he was having to shoulder a lot of the responsibility. But he's done brilliantly since then. You know, he's played fantastically for us. But I think, you know, again in lockdown we pushed him so hard, and he's just looked shattered in a lot of recent games. He's okay early on perhaps, but he by the second half he just cannot contribute really, and it's like playing with 10 men. The problem is, Steve, I mean, Selena and Cooper clearly do not see eye to eye. They are not fans of each other, if we're being honest. Selena does not fit. He's not a Steve Cooper type player, Selena, and he's not responded very well to his coaching this season because his form has been poor, if we're being honest. So, I mean, do we want to start Selena? Because I'm a massive Selena fan. I love him, and I'll be gutted if we actually do waste him by letting him go this summer. But let's face it, during the restart, when he has come off the pitch, he's not really done much in most of these games. He's been pretty ineffective and hasn't looked really up to speed, if we're being honest. So I'll be honest, I'm wary about actually starting Selena, and that is coming from Selena's biggest fan.
Yeah, I do see your point, if I'm honest, but at the same time, we don't have the deepest of squads, and if you think we do need to make some changes, then what do we do? Buyers maybe could come in, I suppose, but we've got to do something, haven't we? If we're gonna take Gallagher out, I mean, it's surely going to be Byers or Selena, or maybe Dander, I suppose, could come in. That's an option for us, but I do agree with what you're saying in principle. Selena has not been great. And I think he's only scored 2 goals all season, and they were both in August, so it's pretty damn. And I haven't really liked Cooper's mentality with Selena. He seems to think that he's more effective out wide, but that's absolute crap, if you ask me. Yeah. And the way that he's played this season does indicate that it's crap. So for whatever reason, he doesn't really like playing him down the middle. He's only done it in a few games, twice against Cardiff as an example. But if you look at it with the Cardiff game, there was that one chance, wasn't there, where he broke through the middle and had that shot that hit the post. And we've not really seen enough of that from him this year. But when he's been playing, in a different position, one that doesn't suit him, in my opinion, then that's probably contributed to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it'll say a lot about what Cooper thinks of Selena, how he uses him over the next 2 games, because players are just collapsing all over the place, and you'd think that Selena is his first choice to replace quite a number of those players, and if he's used in the coming games, then that tells you what Cooper thinks of him, really, doesn't it? As if we need any more indication, really. I mean, let's look ahead as well to the final game of the season. It's going to be against Reading away. The Medeski Stadium is a dull away game at the best of times. It's going to be even duller with no fans there. Do you think that we are even mathematically going to be in with a chance going into this match?
Possibly. There's a fair chance that realistically we won't. But I suppose you just don't know, really, do you? We've just got to take it one game at a time, and that means we'll see what the situation is, really, won't we? But I mean, if Cardiff are going to slip, you've got to think it's going to be against Middlesbrough. I don't think it's going to be against Hull, is it? So, I think we'll have a fair idea then, won't we, of what the situation is. I mean, if we're 3 points behind Cardiff going into that last game, I mean, surely Hull are not going to go there and win. Obviously, it would be absolutely brilliant if they did. It would be probably the best way to get into the playoffs. But I mean, it's asking a lot. But look, I suppose if we are only 3 behind, obviously our goal differences are similar. So it would suggest that if we were to win the 2 games, it would probably be better than theirs and would put us in there. But, you can just take it one game at a time if we're still in there. Again, just got to go for the win and see what happens. But, as we've said, really, it just looks like a tall order, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, unfortunately. Just looking at Reading, I mean, they are... I hesitate to call Reading interesting because there's nothing interesting about Reading whatsoever. There never has been. But... we've got, I mean, they've been managed now for the last few months by Mark Bowen, which obviously is a local of these areas, of this area. And his record's been a bit mixed. I mean, it's been better than his predecessor, but just looking back over the lockdown fixtures, it's been a bit mixed from them. I mean, they've had good results and bad. Just looking at the last 4 games, then they beat Luton 5-0 away, which is astonishing. But then they follow that up with a drab 0-0 at home to Huddersfield. They won away at Charlton, which isn't the easiest place to go, but then lost at home to Middlesbrough. So it's just been a bit of a mixed season for Mark Bowen. I think that kind of reflects how they've been all season. Really, they've not got a bad squad, and if anything, if you're looking at underachievers in the championship this season, I think you have to look at Reading because they've got a decent squad. They really have. There are some good players in that team, but they've just never really kicked off this season. They've had a few good performances. They've had some impressive results. But they've never really built on those results, and I mean, as a Reading fan, it must have just been a very frustrating season for them.
Yeah, they do seem like a bit of a strange team. They're probably a typical mid-table championship team, really, as in where they'll get some good results and then they'll get some strange ones then as well. I mean, that win at Luton was bizarre, really, wasn't it? I mean, probably wound a lot of us up quite a lot because obviously we just lost to them, and then a team with nothing to play for gone there and won 5-0, and you're thinking, how the hell has that happened? But yeah, they're a funny one, aren't they? To be fair, they weren't a bad side, were they, earlier in the season when they came to the Liberty? I know they had a late equaliser against us, but they did actually play quite well in the second half, and they were probably worth their point. Reading, they're a funny one. They're definitely better than they were last year. I remember I think we played them on New Year's Day. We went there and won. I think we scored 4. I just remember looking at them thinking to myself, I think they are going down. Obviously, they didn't go down. But this year, they haven't really been in a huge amount of trouble. I think they've always been sort of bottom half, haven't they? But not, maybe bottom 6 or such. So they'll view it as progress, I suppose, in that sense. Because the year before, when Paul Clement went in there, again, they were struggling and managed to survive. But there has been an improvement. But yeah, they do seem to be quite inconsistent, don't they? Then that's something they'll probably be looking for, for next season. But I think looking at how their results have gone, going there will be a bit of a strange one in terms of what Reading will turn up, and then obviously what we will or won't need, I suppose, going into it.
Yeah, it's hard to look ahead that far, etc. But if worse comes to worse and we don't have anything to play for, are there any fringe players or youth team players that you feel we should actually be giving a go to if it does turn out to be a dead rubber?
Yeah, I think we probably should be giving chances to people. I mean, you look at Liam Cullen, would be a good example. Why doesn't he get given minutes? I mean, I think he should be. And then, we would need to look to the future. That's the problem, because we know a lot of these players next season are going to be in the team. That's the simple fact of it, really, isn't it? So, I don't know who else can play. I don't know if they think that Josh Gould is any good, but would it be worth him getting a game, for example? Because I'm pretty sure Mulder's going to leave, isn't he? And then I suppose it's even the case of, say, someone like Nathan Dyer's going to leave. Would we consider maybe giving him a start just because, it would be his final game for the club kind of thing? And obviously he's been a good servant. So, yeah, I think you could well see changes, but obviously if we are only 3 points off, even if the mathematics look unlikely, then it's not going to happen, is it? We are going to play a full team. So it's, as you say, it's difficult to look ahead, really, isn't it, at this stage when, we're looking at it and we're thinking in terms of percentages, we're unlikely to still be in it, but it's not out of the question either, is it, that we, mathematically at least would still have an outside chance.
Yes, and if we do mathematically have a chance, of course we have to go for that in the desperate hope that that'll do us a favour against Cardiff. That would be a desperate hope. Let's go through the usual predictions, Steve. We'll start off with the Bristol City match. How do you see it going?
This is a very difficult one to call. I'm just going to sit on the fence and say 1-1, I think.
Yeah, do you know what? Bristol City games aren't usually very entertaining. I just don't see us winning at the moment. I just think the way we've collapsed physically over the last few games suggests to me that we're going to struggle to hold on, even if we take the lead. And for that reason, I'm going to go for a 1-1 as well. I just think it's going to be another game where we struggle in the second half, really, against a team who've had a little bit of a resurgence over the last few weeks. I think we've got similar ideas there. And then a very difficult one to predict because Lord knows what kind of lineups both teams are going to put out. But the final game of the season, away at Reading, what do you think the score will be?
I think the final day, as you say, are always quite unpredictable. No one really knows what you're going to get to. I remember last year I went to the Blackburn game. It's quite an entertaining 2-2. And but beforehand, you're thinking, I don't know what we're going to see. This could be a shocking end of season 0-0, couldn't it? But I think there could be goals in that game. That Reading have, as I say, they've dished out that hammer into Luton, so obviously they know they were the back of the net themselves. I think I might go 2-2 on that one. Just because I think on the end of the season you sometimes do get strange games.
I'll be honest. I think if we've got nothing to play for, I think Reading will be quite keen to finish the season on a high. And I can see us losing that game 2-1, say. Just because I think by then I think we would probably have given up if as I suspect. We'll have little to play for. So I think it could be finishing the season with a whimper, which is a shame if that is how it turns out, because actually, I think you'll agree, Steve, there have been some real positives in the last few weeks. And actually, some of the football that we've seen, despite the results not perhaps reflecting it, some of the football we've seen has been up there with the best we played all season.
Yeah, I think it has, for sure. Certainly the best in, for a fair while. And I think the frustrating thing is that we didn't go with this formation earlier in the season. As I said earlier, really, in the podcast, that it has felt like it suited us better. And, I think the evidence for that was there quite a while ago, really, certainly after maybe the January window had shut. And, when things weren't going well for us, we should have looked to change it earlier if we had. It may just have made a difference. But, there's not a lot we can do about that now, is there? No,
there isn't, unfortunately. And we just have to hope and pray that Warnock and Hull's miserable bunch of losers actually find a miracle from somewhere to open the door for us back into the playoffs. But let's face it, we're not holding our breaths. thanks, Steve, for tonight, and thank you for joining us. And hopefully you will join us again after the Reading match, when we will be recording our next pod, looking back at the season as a whole. Until then, thank you very much for joining us.